Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair and members of Parliament, so the 2024-2026 medium-term budget plan, the government has committed to revive growth by sustaining macro stability and ensuring right policies that will foster private sector. And particularly this is in a bid to transform Zambia from being basically a raw material producing country to one that is adding value in the key sectors of our economy, such as the agriculture sector, mining sector, tourism and manufacturing. So these are the key sectors under the economic transformation that government intends to revive. I must mention that industrialization is key driver for socio-economic transformation and job creation, because when we have industries, when we are adding value to what we are producing as a country, we create employment for our people, especially the youths, but also we increase the tax base for the country, because then we will be exporting finished products as opposed to exporting raw materials, because essentially what that means, every time we're exporting raw materials, be it copper, be it minerals or anything from the agricultural sector, we are also exporting employment with that, as well as revenue for government. Honorable Chair and members of Parliament, so under this economic transformation, like I said, there's agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and tourism. Agriculture sector remains a backbone for Zambian economy, although its contribution to GDP has been very low in our country, basically because we have only been exporting raw materials in this sector, but also we have over the years been using agrarian sort of agriculture. If you look the kind of agriculture that our people practice across the country, it's not mechanized. There's no incentive for adding value to what we produce. And so we have noticed that in the budget plan, government has intention to fully implement the comprehensive agriculture transformation support program that addresses agriculture production and productivity as well as value chain. So this is a positive move, and as institutions that work in rural areas, we commend government on this. But for us to harness agricultural potential and transform rural communities, we need to put a policy. We looking off from the rural areas where their income and livelihoods will improve. The same thing applies to the mining sector. So Zambia has been mining for over 100 years, but we have not as a country seen benefits from the mining sector, because we have been exporting minerals in raw form. And so we feel that there's need for us to add value to what we are producing in the mining sector, and this will come about if we start industrializing. So we have industries that will add value to our minerals, and this will lead me to the next sector, which is manufacturing. Once we start adding value, once we industrialize, our manufacturing sector will be vibrant. So we commend government to put in place policies such as the local content policy to ensure that we revamp these key sectors. The other sector, Honorable Chair, is the tourism sector. Zambia is endowed with a lot of tourist attraction, but we have not marketed these sectors. So we'd recommend that we invest more in marketing our tourism sector, but also improving infrastructure in areas such as Western Province, as well as the Northern Circuit. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I will invite my colleagues to also speak to the other pillars.
Thank you. You have served 1 minute. Okay. Next.
Okay, thank you. I will move straight into the human development objectives, starting with education. Of course, we are discussing the aspect of education in the context of the free education policy. It is something that we commend. I think the response itself shows us that indeed so many children wanted to be in school. We also take note that at mid-year we've been very consistent in terms of the disbursements, grants to the schools, but we've also seen funds go towards supporting tertiary education in terms of recovered assets. Perhaps one aspect that we want to emphasize is the issue of infrastructure. There seems to be a tendency to push a lot of infrastructure projects towards CDF, but we feel it's important that the education sector budget, even in the MTBB, actually takes into context that there's need to ensure that we're actually building schools. We continue, despite CDF also complementing that aspect. We also note that on education, CDF is quite silent on early childhood education. Therefore, we expect that the larger education sector budget can take care of this component. I'll move on to social protection. Social protection is really something that we have commended in the MTBB. We've seen that resources have been allocated in as far as increasing resources for social protection. We've seen aspects of social cash transfer, for example, the bi-monthly payments have been quite consistent. This is something that we commend and we hope it's something that will continue. We also highlight for social cash transfer, for example, there's need to consider increasing the value amount. We are not trying to encourage dependency, but when we look at aspects of fundamentals such as inflation, cost of living, how do we ensure that even the vulnerable who have been existing in the context where the economy has continued to deteriorate prior to the debt restructuring, for example, how can we ensure that we are also supporting them? But we also need to think of sustainability. How do we impact them with knowledge to ensure that they become self-sufficient? If we are going to win them off, it's important that we are taking care of this. I'll move on to health. So for health, I think a starting point in our intervention today is really just to acknowledge that the budget or the proposed objectives in the MTBB do not meet the Abuja declaration at any point in the years in question. The allocations are 10.4, 11 or so. What we are saying is that there's need to dedicate those resources. Ideally, they should be incremental at every point in time, regardless of how big the budget is. Why we are speaking to this is we see CDF, for example, a priority area for a community may be to build a health post, but we may find ourselves in a scenario where drugs and medical supplies are not able to meet these different facilities that are built. I'll give an example of Michael Chilufya Sata Hospital in Pika, which is a very good building. It has room for several services, but because of lack of equipment, lack of drugs and supply, you find this challenge actually taking cognizance. So we do make mention this aspect is quite important, even in the context of NEMA. I know NEMA has to do with social security issues, but of course, how can we ensure that it's also sustainable to say that the people who are contributing are able to benefit from it, as well as those who are not contributing. Apologies. We'll move on to the environmental sustainability. We do take note that there are measures that want to strengthen the fight against climate change in terms of adaptation and mitigation by developing climate resilient infrastructure. This is commendable. We need to ensure that we continue to encourage and extend, also improve the coverage of early warning systems. Zambia has been quite prone to two challenges, if I can make mention, in terms of drought and flooding, so we need to be proactive in our response. But one thing that we have noted over time is that allocations to the environmental protection sector have continued to be quite low. If this is a challenge that we are attributing to so many issues not working well, for example, diversifying the energy sector in as far as hydro, this is something that has continued to come out. It's quite important that we allocate sufficient resources, but also we ensure that we have a national climate change fund that can allow us to depend on our own resources to respond to challenges, as opposed to possibly relying on dollar funds for some of these interventions. I'll allow my colleague to come in.
Okay, so I will conclude by looking at the good governance environment pillar. So over the medium term, government has committed to improve the policy and governance environment, as well as promoting adherence to the rule of law. As CSPR and JCT, we are recommending that there is need to enact and implement the access to information legislation. I think as a country we have really taken long to implement this policy, and also there is need to implement the Public Order Act. There is need to review and implement the Public Gathering Bill, which is in place. I think there is some consultation. So we need a proper roadmap for that and ensure that this legislation is put in place to ensure that there is good governance environment. We are also recommending the operationalization of the ACC offices at district level to just ensure that there is effective concluding of corruption cases at district level. But also we are saying, can we review the policies and legal frameworks governing the implementation of CDF? We have seen the goodwill that the government has presented by increasing CDF, but we feel there is need to really and critically look at reviewing this policy to ensure that these policies, but also what we want to achieve at the end of the day is achieved by the country. I think I will conclude by these few submissions.
Okay, thank you very much, our colleagues, for. Is that an indication for a question? Okay, honourable members, we have two hands now. I have a hand from Honourable Stwala and Honourable Munganda and then Honourable Simunchi. In that order, Honourable Stwala. We could just Honourable Mulunda, leave the Honourable member to ask his question. Honourable Swallow, you can quiet.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sir, I just want to get back to you on your presentation. You talked about agriculture and its contribution. I just want to maybe you to shed more light on what you think of the CASP that has been introduced now to take our agriculture forward. I'm asking this question with in mind the fact that it's like we've just been changing terms, FISIP, this year, that year, that year. To me, this kind of agriculture is political. It's just something to keep us going, but we are not really seeing something tangible that is going to take our agriculture far in terms of even achieving export levels. Your view on the new introduction, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Mungandu.
Thank you. For me, I want to find out. You know, we've been struggling as a country to an extent where right now our country has gone into debt negotiations with the individual creditors in order to ease the pressure or release income to the social sector. And yet, you can agree with me that we have almost all the resources that we need to finance our budget without even going outside the country. If you look at the gold that is being discovered every day, sugilite, there are many other precious minerals which as a people we are not exploiting. Even where multinationals, Chair, have come to exploit, we have given them what would people have called tax incentives, which has made them project that in the next 5 years they are not expected to make money. And yet, as a people, we are saying in the next 10 years we want to increase production in the same mines from less than 1 million tons to 3 million tons, and yet the mines are saying for them in the next 5 years they are not going to make any profit because they are still investing. What do you think as a committee should be recommending to government? For example, should we recommend that instead of giving up shareholding, we should be increasing Zambian citizen ownership in this sector so that we have much needed resources to finance the budget? I end, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Honourable Simunji.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My name is Comrade Simunji, Member of Parliament for the Likwanda constituency in Western Province. My question will be based on the environment. You will notice that Zambia has been relying heavily on the hydropower, which depends on the rainfall patterns. However, if you go to our markets now, you find a lot of charcoal coming from all corners of the country, which again affects the rainfall pattern. I want you to comment whether government is putting more effort to reduce the use of charcoal in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, you can respond to those.
We're possibly hoping to comment as we had noted the questions, if it's okay. We'll start with the question on agriculture.
Sure.
Our comment on the new program that has been announced. What is our take on that? I think we would like to agree with you. When we look at the agricultural sector, we've had previous national agricultural investment programs that were not actually adhered to in terms of the NAIP 1. FISIP itself, currently, what we have been doing also is research to understand what were the funding modalities. You will appreciate that the agricultural sector, in terms of research and development, has not received adequate attention in as far as being able to see the sector itself mechanized. Those have been some of the challenges. So what we have noted from the new program, of course, there are provisions that move beyond providing farmers with various inputs depending on the modalities, be it electronic or the direct. But what we hope is that attention can be given to sectors such as research and development. We are talking about climate smart agriculture. Does the budget commit, for example, to hire agricultural extension officers? We want to see people mature from the FISIP. That will still be a component of the coming program. Those would be some of our reflections on the sector. It's one that we have neglected, though we recognize that a lot of people depend on it in terms of livelihood. How can we also enhance the aspects around value addition? Because then we'll keep growing maize year in, year out, and have a challenge in as far as some of the issues that we've seen this year, issues to do with smuggling, issues to do with the price. Are we diversifying that sector enough? No, we are not.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and I'll take Honorable Mungandu's question. What I picked is, are we benefiting as a country from the mining sector? I think I should mention that we've been mining, like I said in my presentation, for over 100 years, but we have not really benefited from the mineral endowment that we have as a country, basically because I think there's been very little value addition to what we produce. So everything that we mine, usually we export it in raw material, and we end up importing finished products that are usually on the higher side. So I think our comment would be that as a country, as we are attracting more investment in the mining sector and hoping to increase production, as the document says, production in the mining sector, we should also expedite the process of industrializing to ensure that we're adding value. In that way, we'll be able to benefit more from our mining sector. With regards to the issues of percentages, I think what would be probably policy, to put a policy, a local content policy in place to ensure that mining firms and anyone doing mining activities in Zambia procures a certain percentage of services and goods within the boundaries of Zambia. I know the current is at 35% of local goods and services, but we could increase that to ensure that our local people are participating in the business and are benefiting from mining, because mining is also capital intensive, and so leaving it in the hands of the state, we may not be able to efficiently and prudently run the sector. Thank you.
I think we missed one question on the fight against climate, the use of charcoal. In summary, if that was the question.
Yeah.
The reality here is that for as long as we have not provided alternatives to people who depend on charcoal as a livelihood, it's not something that will end. Even as you drive towards the airport, you see so many bicycles coming into town, because even some of us who are educated are the very people who are demanding for charcoal. We've seen a few initiatives, maybe with Kansanshi Foundation, where they create charcoal, maybe using manure, but that's not something that we've fully scaled up. So that debate or that conflict will honestly continue for as long as we have not provided alternatives. It's quite unfortunate, because then we are also damaging the common home, if I could call Earth, but we do recognize that it's something that is quite important, and it slows down the progress that we make even in fighting climate change, much as we recognize that it's been very damaging on the economy of Zambia.
So, just tagging on that one, do we have alternatives? And if so, why haven't we taken advantage to utilize those alternatives? Because I know this topic, in fact, for me from 2016, as a member of parliament, your colleagues have been coming, and we've been touching on this issue of charcoal burning versus the alternatives. And I don't think it just started in 2016. It could have started away. Do we really have alternatives for this? Because for me, what I was told when I was growing up, if today you close a tap on one side, I'll find a means of survival. Okay? So it's the issue of alternatives. Do we today, if we just said, okay, no charcoal burning, are those people who are doing that going to die, or they'll have immediately they will change to something without even us realizing that they will change? Do we have alternatives?
So possibly, and my colleagues will come in to share some of their perspectives. Perhaps maybe on enforcement. For example, if someone like myself in town is found buying charcoal, how can we ensure that we begin to deal with it from both the demand and supply? Of course, there are vulnerable populations. For some, it's just a matter of skills. Maybe that's where CDF could play a role, but are we sensitizing different individuals to the extent that this is something they've known their whole lives that they can do away with it? So we have to provide alternatives, like I did earlier mention, which could be in form of livelihood, in form of employment. But on the other side of the coin, there's people like you and me who are quite conscious. Possibly we don't turn off lights, we don't close the tap. It's so many different aspects that can actually be enforced if we are going to be very serious about fighting climate change. Unfortunately, government will play its role, but it also has to do with behavioral change from individuals all the way upwards. Possibly some comments from my colleagues.
Just to add on, I think we have alternatives, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I think we need an enforcement where buying charcoal, probably there could be some penalties. So for the people in towns, liquefied gas, we need to sensitize people that it's actually safe to use gas for cooking, but also the green charcoal that my colleague mentioned, as well as biomass. We can actually generate cooking energy from human waste, but this is something that I think has happened somewhere in Western Province. There was a project of, so when we start sensitizing people that there's this alternative that we can use, we can actually reduce on charcoal consumption. But like my colleague has said, it's not something very easy because there's already a willing buyer in the urban areas, and so the willing seller will always find the alternative. Finding burning charcoal, if it's easier than agriculture and it brings in money quicker, then they'll go to that option. So maybe if we start by reducing the demand from the urban areas, then we could actually win the fight against charcoal burning. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take the last question from Honorable Mwambazi.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps it's not even a question, it's just a comment that under the Ministry of Green Economy, I think there's an intervention which is starting, but also government has got a bigger role to play in the sense that there are proposals for introduction of these LPG gas stoves, which when they come at a tax incentive, then there's a pilot program where they want to phase it out, where they can give stoves for free, but people buy gas. But again, there's a cost. So I think there are talks on what incentives government can provide to that effect, because this issue of penalties and enforcement is not really working, because you cannot just enforce or a penalty. Some is a livelihood, it's a business, it's for free, they just cut trees, they don't pay anything. So we need to look at back to back and see how do we mitigate it. Again, a lot of sensitization is needed to that effect to ensure that people are aware what are the major effects, even as government comes in to provide an incentive for our people, because then we'll be preserving our forest as well as providing a service to the people. So I just thought of commenting that because I've been talking to the Minister of Green Economy on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. For poverty reduction and justice center, for theoretical reflection. Thank you very much for coming through. You really have been helping us quite a lot in these issues over time. We have never shied away when called upon to appear before these committees, and we don't take lightly of that. We should commend you for doing good. This is how it should be, and this is where we end for today. I know not long from now we'll be calling you again to appear before some of these committees. So in terms of the provisions of Cap 12, that which was conferred earlier on you, we'll also end here. Do have a good day. We'll see you next time when we call upon you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
It's a land where every person is born free, and it's a land of peace, of love and unity. This land, Zambia, land of the strong, home of the brave, our land, Zambia, free men we stand. In this land. aside. Put a trust in God.
Learn to love each other. You my sister, you my brother.
Right or wrong, together we are stronger.
So don't let nothing
tear us apart. Land of the strong, home of the brave, and we stand. This land, Zambia, land of the strong, home of the brave, our land, Zambia, free men we stand. This Zambia, land of the strong, home of the brave, our land, Zambia, free men we stand in this land.
My name is Engineer Jonathan Daka. I'm 46 years old, of course married with the 4 beautiful children, or boys. I went to Chipata for my entire primary school, even secondary school. Thereafter I went to the University of Zambia in 1995, where I graduated with a Bachelor's of Engineering in civil engineering in 2002, after staying there for an extended time of 7 years. That's my basic qualification. I'm an engineer by profession. My constituency is located on the southeast part of Zambia, bordering with Mozambique. This constituency is a rural constituency with the 20 wards, and this constituency being a border constituency, you know, this is a constituency which actually houses the Chanida border, which is the shortest border to the sea coast for the country. Therefore, the much of the, and it's proud of its imports of fuel, because about 70% of the fuel that we use as a country actually passes through this very important border. And this constituency, as I've already said, is a rural constituency whose major economic activities is farming, just like most rural constituencies. But for Chadiza is a food basket for Eastern Province. It's proud of a lot of crops that our farmers grow in Chadiza, ranging from maize, groundnuts, and even cash crops like cotton and tobacco. Just like any other rural constituency, Chadiza faces a lot of challenges. This constituency is one of the most backwards constituency, as it lacks most of the basic infrastructure. Chadiza basically is one of the poorest constituencies. So all the basic structure, the basic infrastructure is lacking in Chadiza, and even poverty levels are very high. My developmental agenda, as I've already said, is to transform this constituency. I've told you it's lacking in most of the basic infrastructure, but first of all, therefore, should be to open up this constituency on the issues to do with the internal roads, these small roads first of all, and then also open it up to the other parts of the country. I mean, we need to connect Chadiza to the rest of the country through a bituminous standard road, because Chadiza is one of the few constituencies or districts which has never actually been connected to the rest of the country through a third road. Therefore, one of my first agenda is to ensure that we connect Chadiza to the rest of the country through a bituminous standard road, besides those of the internal roads. It's my belief that after doing that, actually will trigger the other economic activities which are lacking in the district. So my agenda will start with the roads, and then we deal with these other, because almost all these other need areas are lacking. In education, we're backwards. Water and sanitation, we're backwards. Issues to do with we're dealing with poverty is backwards, and we have kids and women being the most affected in this constituency. My word to the people of Chadiza is that of unity. I've already said this constituency is a very vast constituency with 20 wards. Therefore, we should unite the constituencies like that, because I believe that there's never been unity in the constituency. There's too much pulling apart, pulling down, pulling apart. So my word to my electorate is that let's unite in the interest of developing our constituency. Because if you are divided, actually we are not going to achieve anything. So let's unite, be it women, youths, chiefs, and everyone. Let's unite for a common cause, which is in the name of bringing development to our constituency. That's the word. They should believe in their leader, and they should give him all the support. The problem which is there, looking at what is happening, is that it cannot be a problem to do with leadership now. I believe that the right leadership now has been given to the people of Chadiza. All they need to do now is to lag behind their leader, give him all the moral support, so that he can bring the much needed development that people have always wanted to come to the constituency.
My names are Marjorie Nakaponda. I was born in 1963. In a family, we are 8. 4 girls, 4 boys. I'm the firstborn. I started my grade 1 in 1971 at Chiwanda Primary School in Isoka. In 1978, I went at Ritkila Girls Secondary School. We were the 12 of us who applied at Ritkila Girls Secondary School, but only 2 of us went because we are the ones who had the high marks. I completed my secondary school in 1982, from 1978 to 1982. After completion, I started working at Nambodi as a cashier. I worked for 4 years, from 1984 to 1988. We were declared redundant. That time, I was already married to Mr. Kashinka, my husband, and I had 2 children, a boy and a girl. In 1988, I went for nursing school. I applied as a nurse at Chilonga School of Nursing, and I was accepted. I completed the nursing in 1990. 1991, I started work at Isoka General Hospital. I worked there for 7 years. We were transferred from Isoka to Chinsali. When I went to Chinsali, I continued as a nurse. After some time, I applied for unpaid leave and started There's something that I wanted to do. In 1912, I was appointed as a diplomat by His Excellency, the late Michael Chilufya-Sata, in 2012. May his soul rest in peace. I went to Belgium as a diplomat. I worked in Belgium as a diplomat for 4 years. Then I requested for a transfer. I went to Malawi as Deputy High Commission from 2015 to 2017. After that, I went back to Chinsali. I've done a degree in Human Resource Management and a diploma in Public Administration. In 2020, I applied to contest as a Member of Parliament for Isoka. Fortunately, I was adopted. And I started my campaigns. On 12th August 2021, I was elected as a Member of Parliament. I am proud to tell you that I'm the first female MP in Isoka constituency since 1964.